In a remote village surrounded by towering pines and age-old superstitions, a woman named Alira lived under the weight of expectation. In this place, a woman's worth was measured by her ability to bear children. To be childless was not just a misfortune, it was considered a curse. Alira had been married for 5 years to Taran, a stonemason with a stern face and a colder heart. As the seasons turned and her womb remained silent, the villagers turned on her. At first, it was whispers. Then it was glances. Eventually, even her husband's family, who once welcomed her with celebration, began to look at her with contempt. They said she had been born hollow, and some swore her presence soured the milk and killed the crops. No priest or healer could find cause. No blessing took root. Finally, the family made a decision, one so cruel it was spoken of only in hushed voices. One morning at dawn, under the guise of a spiritual journey to seek answers from the forest, Mother Alira was led beyond the edge of the village. Her husband and his brothers told her to kneel, pray, and wait for a sign. And then they left her alone in the dense, ancient wood, carrying nothing but a thin cloak and a hollow ache in her chest. The villagers assumed the forest would do what they lacked the courage to finish. The wood, after all, was known for its strange magic and darker things, creatures that moved between trees and whispers that led people astray. But Alira did not die. She was angry. She was heartbroken. But she was not finished. In the beginning, survival was grim. She found shelter in a tree hollow, drank rainwater, and ate bitter berries. Each night, the cold crept into her bones, and each morning she woke with resolve. She built traps for small game, learned which mushrooms wouldn't kill her, and fashioned a small hut from fallen limbs and mud. Days bled into weeks. She stopped counting time. One dusk, while following the sound of birdsong, she heard something strange: laughter. Children's laughter. She crept toward it and found 3 children, playing with makeshift swords carved from branches. Their clothes were patchwork, and their cheeks were smudged with dirt, but their eyes were bright. They froze when they saw her. "Who are you?" she asked gently. "We live with the lumberjack," the oldest girl said, gripping her wooden sword. "But he went away. Where did he go?" Alira asked. The girl shrugged. "He said the trees were calling." Alira followed them through a narrow trail, past fallen trees and moss-covered stones, until they reached a cabin nestled in a thicket. It was sturdy but weather-worn, with a stack of firewood and an axe driven into a stump. Inside there were signs of a once cared-for home: pots, blankets, shelves lined with jars, but no adult in sight. The children let her stay, watching her like wild animals, with skeptical, curious, cautious. She cooked a stew that night with what she had, and they sat around the fire in silence, eating slowly. She did not ask many questions. Neither did they. Days turned into weeks. The children taught her how to navigate the deeper woods, where the best wild onions grew and which creeks ran clean. In turn, she taught them how to read from an old book she found in the cabin, how to mix herbs into poultices, how to sew and mend. She sang them lullabies they had never heard, brushed their tangled hair, and kissed their foreheads when they fell asleep. They did not call her mother. Not at first. But they clung to her skirt when storms came and brought her wildflowers when she looked sad. Seasons changed. The forest, once eerie and silent, now felt alive. Birds returned to the cabin roof. Wild deer grazed nearby without fear. Alira began to dream not of her old village or of children she never bore, but of a new life, a new family made not by blood, but by choice. One day, a rider from the village arrived, gaunt and desperate. A sickness had taken hold, and the healer was gone. They had heard rumors of a woman in the woods who knew cures, who lived among wild children and tamed the forest. They begged her to return. Alira listened without emotion. The man did not recognize her dot. She went to the edge of the woods but did not cross it. Her past was ash behind her. She gave the writer herbs and instructions but refused to go back. Her home was here with the children in the quiet heart of the forest. The village would recover, perhaps, or it would not. But Alira had been reborn not as a mother by nature, but by love. In the eyes of the children who once had no one, she had become everything. And so, in the forest, she remained stronger than before, forgotten by the world that once cast her out, but remembered forever in the stories whispered by the fire. Of the woman who became a mother not by fate, but by choice. Months passed like turning pages in a well-worn book. Alira's life in the forest settled into rhythm, quiet, steady, healing. The children, once scrappy and guarded, flourished under her care. Their names slowly revealed themselves in whispered confidence. The fierce girl was Kale. The quiet boy with clever hands was Ren. And the youngest, who clung to Alira like a shadow, was Mira. They told her stories in bits and pieces of the lumberjack who had taken them in. A man tall as a pine tree, who spoke few words and taught them everything they knew. How to split wood cleanly, how to listen for wolves, how to track deer without disturbing the earth. But one day, he said the forest had spoken to him in dreams, and he left, walking east with only an axe and a smile, never to return. Alira wondered whether he had died or simply become part of the woods. In this place, she was learning such things were not impossible. The cabin became more than shelter, it was a home now. She cleaned the soot-blackened chimney. She wove curtains from old rags and added flowers to the table. She read to the children by firelight. They laughed more. Often, they touched her hand unafraid. And one night, as Mira climbed into her lap with a blanket, the child called her Mama without thinking, and Alira wept quietly, holding her close. But the forest was never still for long. That winter came early, and with it, strange signs. Trees along the eastern ridge began to lean inward, creaking even without wind. A black fox watched from the shadows for days. The river ran slower, as if hesitating. Kale, bold as ever, found an arrow embedded in a tree near the southern trail, too fine for a hunter, too cruel for a warning. Alira's instincts stirred. This piece, she realized, was borrowed time. One morning, smoke curled on the horizon. Not from firewood, from buildings, from chimneys. From the village, the children crowded around her as she stood in the clearing, staring toward the plume. It meant only one thing: they were coming. Word had spread. The herbs she gave the writer must have worked, and now the village remembered her, the barren woman they had cast into the forest. But the stories that returned painted her differently: a healer, a witch, a mother of the wood. To a frightened people, stories change quickly. She had no illusions. They wouldn't come for gratitude. That evening, she prepared the cabin as if for siege, not with weapons, but with purpose. She boiled potions. She taught the children how to pack quickly, what to grab if they had to flee. She marked tree paths with stones. But the children refused to leave her. "You saved us," said Ren. "We're not running." That night, Kale stood watch with the old axe the lumberjack had left behind, its head nearly too heavy for her small arms. Alira braided Mira's hair by firelight and whispered the names of stars to calm her dot at dawn. They heard footsteps, not one, many. She stepped out onto the porch. Her old village had arrived, dozens of them, wearing cloaks and worry. At the front stood her husband Taran, flanked by elders. He looked older, thinner, but no less proud. "Alira," he said. She said nothing. "We need your help," he went on, scanning the children behind her with unease. "The sickness came back. The crops won't grow. The healer is dead. People say the forest listens to you." Alira stared at him for a long time. He would not meet her eyes fully. "You left me here to die," she said. We thought? You? Didn't think. You feared. You discarded me like broken clay." A long silence. Snow began to fall thin, but steady. One of the village women stepped forward. Her hands trembled. "Please," she said. "My baby is dying. We don't care about curses. Just help us." Alira's heart stirred, but she did not move. Not yet. She turned to her children. "What do you want me to do?" Kale gripped the ferret axe tighter. "They'll use you again." "But others might truly need help," said Ren. Mira said nothing, just clung to Alira's skirt. Alira turned back to the villagers. "I'll give you herbs, instructions, enough to help your sick. But I will not return. This is my home now," murmurs spread. Some shouted, others wept. But she did not flinch. "You came for a miracle." "But I am not a miracle. I am just a woman you left behind." She handed over the bundles of medicine and stepped back across the threshold into the warm light of the cabin. She shut the door. The snow fell harder. Inside, her children gathered. Around her, no blood connected them, no law bound them. But they were hers and she was theirs. Outside, the villagers left in silence, carrying not just herbs, but a lesson. Some things, once cast away, do not come back the same. The snow did not stop for 3 days. Alira remained inside with the children, warm by the hearth, watching the flames dance like memories. Outside, the world was still, but she could feel the forest shifting, listening, stirring. Something ancient was waking. It began subtly. A raven perched on the roof every morning, always facing east. The trees around the cabin began to lean away from it slightly, as if making space. Frost patterns on the windows formed symbols she didn't understand, but Mira traced them with her fingers, smiling. "Alira," Ren whispered one night, "do you think the forest remembers things?" She looked up from her stitching. "Yes, I think it never forgets." Kale stood by the window, still gripping the old axe. She hadn't let it go since the villagers had come. Then why is it watching us now? The answer came 2 days later. Alira woke in the middle of the night to find Mira gone. Panic tore through her as she and the others searched, only to find the child outside, barefoot, eyes glowing faintly under the moonlight, standing at the forest's edge. "Alira," she said softly, "the forest wants to speak with you." The trees parted. Without knowing how, Alira understood. She was being summoned. She left the children behind, though it pained her, and followed the path that opened like a wound in the woods. The deeper she went, the more unreal the world became. Flowers bloomed from frozen earth. The air shimmered with gold mist. Shadows moved like they had names. At the heart of the forest, she found a circle of stones older than anything she had ever seen. There, a figure waited, tall, cloaked in moss and bark, its face shifting like smoke. "The forest spirit, you have done what others would not," it said without sound. "You gave life without bearing it. You nurtured what was broken. You healed what did not belong to you. The forest owes you a debt." Alira bowed her head. "I want nothing. I only want to keep my children safe." "And so you shall," said the spirit, "but they are no longer just children. They are the future of the forest. They have been marked." Alira's heart clenched. "What do you mean?" "They will be hunted, not just by men, but by the old powers returning to this land. You gave them love, but love alone cannot protect. You must become more." She felt it then, something entering her, like roots growing beneath her ribs. Power. Cold, wild, ancient. "Will you accept it?" the forest asked. Alira looked into the trees. She saw Kale's fierce eyes, Ren's thoughtful gaze, Mira's soft hands. She saw what they could become and what would try to stop them. "Yes," she said. The forest roared. When she returned to the cabin, dawn had not yet come, but her hair had streaks of silver. Her eyes shimmered with green. And the animals of the forest bowed slightly as she passed. She was no longer just Alira. She was something more. Winter passed, and spring returned like an old friend carrying forgotten truths. Alira had changed. She moved like wind through branches, heard whispers in leaves, and her touch could wake sleeping seeds. But she remained grounded, chopping wood, cooking meals, telling stories. The children noticed her power, but they did not fear it. They honored it, even as they began to change too. Kale grew stronger, faster, and the axe no longer felt too big. Birds followed her in the sky, and trees bent slightly in her presence. She was becoming a guardian, fierce and rooted. Ren could speak to insects and see in the dark. He crafted things from wood that seemed alive, tools that never dulled, traps that reset themselves. He spoke little, but his silence was full of wisdom, and Mira, gentle, laughing Mira, began to glow in moments of stillness. Flowers bloomed beneath her steps. She could calm wolves with a whisper and lift grief from hearts with a single touch. The forest was not just their home. It was their blood now. But peace does not last in such stories. One morning, smoke rose again, but this time not from the village. A group of men had come into the woods armored, wearing red crests on their tunics. Mercenaries, not from the village, but from the capital beyond the mountains. They had heard rumors of miracles in the forest, of a woman who defied death, of children with strange gifts. Alira watched them from a high tree, her heart tight. They seek to take. The forest whispered to her, to bind what they do not understand, to burn what they cannot own. Alira returned to the cabin and prepared the children. This time, she said, we do not hide. We protect what is ours. She gave Kale the axe, which now pulsed faintly with green runes. She traced a blessing over Ren's brow, giving him eyes sharper than any scout's. She wrapped Mira in a cloak of woven vines, kissed her head, and whispered, "You are light. Remember that." When the soldiers reached the edge of the sacred glade, they were met not by a frail woman and helpless children, but by a storm cloaked in bark, leaf, and fire. Kale stood at the front, fierce as a warrior of old. Ren moved in the shadows, turning traps into chaos. Mira culled vines from the ground to entangle swords and soften angry hearts. Alira stood behind them, her hands raised not in violence, but in protection. The forest moved with her. The battle was short and strange. Many soldiers dropped their weapons and fled, weeping. Others simply stopped as if they'd forgotten what they came for. A few tried to fight and found the earth itself turning against them. When it was done, Alira stood with her children beneath a flowering tree, the air heavy with silence. "We can't hide anymore," Kale said softly. "No," Alira agreed. "We must grow." From that day forward, the forest was no longer a refuge. It was a kingdom. Alira began building not just a home, but a haven. Others would come, women cast out, children abandoned, those who had nowhere else to go. The forest would welcome them all, because love, when planted in good soil, grows not just roots, but legacies. The forest changed after the battle. It no longer merely sheltered Alira and her children. It expanded, grew aware. Trees that once leaned in caution now formed protective circles. Animals lingered longer near the cabin. Strange lights flickered through the branches at night, and the wind sometimes carried voices, grateful, grieving, lost. Whispers spread beyond the treetops. They traveled downriver into distant towns and wandering camps. They passed from trader to traveler, from hunter to bard. There is a woman in the woods who commands the earth. She mothers the forgotten. She heals the broken. Her children wield fire and root and shadow. Some called her a saint. others a witch. But all agreed she was real. Soon they began to come. First, it was a wounded girl left at the forest's edge, barely breathing. Mira found her and carried her into the clearing. Elira laid hands on her chest, and breath returned to her lungs like birds taking flight. The girl stayed. Then came a mother and her 2 sons, cast out from their village for harboring a sickness deemed unclean. They were welcomed, fed, healed. They built a hut nearby and began tending to herbs. Then more slowly, carefully. A blind craftsman, a scarred soldier who couldn't sleep, a pregnant widow with no one left. They all came. Each built a small home of wood and vine, staying close to Elira's circle. Kale helped guard the borders. Ren taught them to build with the forest, not against it. Mira taught them to sing to the trees. What had begun as a cabin became a villagia, hidden sanctuary beneath a cathedral of leaves, a place they began to call Thornhold. The people who lived there didn't speak of bloodlines or crowns. They spoke of healing, of protection, of the woman who had once been cast out and now ruled not with iron, but with care. But kingdoms, even quiet ones, do not go unnoticed forever. From the northern reaches of the land came envoys, men in gold-threaded robes, riding horses with silver bridles. They came from the high city, where nobles ruled behind glass towers and marble gates. They had heard the whispers. Lira met them at the edge of the forest, where the trees were still thick with suspicion. "Lady Elira," the envoy said, offering a tight smile, "we come in peace. The crown recognizes your influence, your healing, your gifts. We wish to form an alliance." Elira's eyes were steady. "The crown cast me aside when I was nothing. Now it seeks alliance when I am something." He cleared his throat. Perhaps that was a mistake. She did not respond. The envoy offered her a scroll sealed in red wax. "The queen wishes to invite you to court, you and your children. Perhaps we could offer land, a title." Elira laughed softly, not cruelly, but like a tree that had seen too many seasons. "You think I want a title? I have one already. My children call me mother." The envoy stiffened. Refusal may be interpreted as rebellion. The trees rustled, though no wind stirred. Somewhere behind them, a fox's eyes gleamed red in the shadows. The envoy felt suddenly, deeply cold. Elira stepped forward and gently handed the scroll back. "Go home," she said. "Tell your queen the forest is not for sale. And warn her, should she send swords instead of words next time, the trees will not be so kind." The men left quickly, but the message had been sent, and word spread faster than fire. The forest kingdom had drawn its boundary. More came to Elira. After that, not just the broken and the cast out, but those who believed. Healers, scribes, old midwives who remembered the language of the stars. They came not to worship her, but to be part of something different. They built a hall of branches woven with stained glass from the river's edge. They planted gardens that grew in spirals. Children ran barefoot across mossy stones and learned how to speak to bees. Mira began dreaming of songs no one had taught her. Ren built a loom that wove fabric from spider silk. Kale trained others in the way of the axe, not to destroy, but to defend. Elira walked the paths daily, her presence like sunrise, soft, powerful, constant. When people bowed, she shook her head. "I am not a queen," she said. "I am just a mother who was once forgotten." And yet she had become something more. The forest whispered her name when the wind blew. Trees bowed in springtime bloom. When the stars were clear, some claimed they saw a constellation shifting to form her shape. Elira never asked for power, but she had grown it. Like roots beneath the surface, unseen and unstoppable. As spring ripened into summer, peace still reigned. But a shadow was gathering in the east, an old power rising, one that feared forests, hated freedom, and burned what it could not bend. And though Alira did not yet know its full name, the forest did, and it was already preparing dot it began with. Smoke. Not the gray wisps of cooking fires or the amber curls of incense in the healing huts. This was thick, black, and bitter. It came not from within Thornhold, but from beyond the outer ridgelines, carried by a wind that smelled of scorched iron and rotting leather. Alira stood at the edge of the high watch, her hair braided with silver leaves, her face calm but alert. Cale stood beside her, axe resting on her shoulder, muscles tense. "That's not village smoke," Cale muttered. "That's war." Wren appeared behind them, clutching a small bird with singed wings. It flew into the fire, trying to warn us. Mira, who had grown quieter as her powers deepened, came last. Her dress shimmered with pollen and light, but her eyes were clouded with something darker. "They're coming. Not just soldiers. Something worse." Alira listened, not just to them, but to the forest itself. Its roots carried panic now, quivering deep underground. The old oaks whispered danger. The mushrooms wilted before words even. Reach them. Far to the east, beyond the edge of the known woods, the high city had stirred. But the threat was not the queen who had once offered alliance. That woman was gone, now replaced by a chancellor with fire in his blood and ash in his breath. A man named Corvan the Pure. He had risen to power preaching control, purity, and conquest. He had declared that magic was to be regulated, that wild lands must be tamed, and that heretical forces living beyond the rule of law posed a threat to the stability of the realm. To the fearful, he promised order. To the cruel, he promised fire. To Alira, he promised war. She gathered the people of Thornhold the next evening in the grove circle. They sat in silence as the sky darkened and stars winked through the branches above. Children clung to their mothers. Hunters rested their hands on knife hilts. Former villagers, wanderers, and forest-born alike listened for the words that would shape their future. "They are coming," Alira said, her voice soft but unwavering. "Not for justice, not for healing. They will come with blades and torches. They will call us wild. They will call us witches. They will burn what they do not understand." A murmur passed through the crowd. "So we fight?" asked a young boy. Near the front, Alira shook her head. "We protect." "There is a difference." Cale stood then, stepping forward. "I've trained a circle of defenders. We know the woods better than they ever will. Let them come." But Myra touched her arm gently. "If we fight them head on, we become what they already fear us to be. There must be another way." Alira looked around, weighing the moment. "We have something they do not," she said. "We are part of the forest. We are the forest. And the forest does not go to war, it endures. It weaves, it surrounds, it waits." That night, under a moon like a silver eye, they began to prepare, not by forging weapons, but by deepening their roots. Wren led a team to awaken the old wards hidden beneath the soil glyphs left by the lumberjack who raised him. Cale marked the trees with silent signs, guiding friend and confusing foe. Mira spent days in meditation, calling on the spirits of growth and bloom, binding vines with intent and light. Alira walked among them all, singing to the plants, whispering to the stones. Her body ached with the power growing inside her, but she welcomed it. She was no longer just a mother. She was becoming something older, something the forest itself had shaped, and when the invaders came, they did not find an army. They found trees that swallowed their horses, paths that led back to where they started, berries that turned to poison in their mouths, songs that made their eyes weep and their hands tremble. Their fires wouldn't catch. Their blades dulled, and when they reached the heart of Thornhold, they found it empty except for Alira, standing alone beneath the elder tree. Corvan himself approached, cloaked in red. eyes burning with ideology. "This place is an infection," he spat. "You could have joined us. Now I'll root you out." Illyra did not flinch. "You mistake what you do not understand for weakness. But I am not alone, and I am not afraid." He raised his hand to order the strike, but the forest moved. First, roots erupted from the ground, binding boots and breaking swords. Vines twisted around throats. Songbirds shrieked like war horns. Trees leaned as if to listen and then fell one by one, collapsing like thunder into enemy ranks. Corvin screamed, and Illyra stepped forward not with hate, but with mercy. "Go back," she said, "before the forest finishes what you started." He fled. They all did. When the last echo of boots faded, the forest grew quiet again. Illyra turned to her people as they emerged from hidden hollows and camouflaged huts. She opened her arms, and they rushed toward her like children coming home. Thornhold was safe, for now, but everyone knew the age of hiding was over. The forest had spoken, and the world had begun to listen. In the weeks after the firestorm invasion was turned away, the forest entered a season of strange stillness. Not peace exactly. Peace suggests an end to struggle. This was different. The stillness of something that has survived. Something that has decided to grow. Thornhold, once a secret sanctuary, had become a name whispered far beyond the trees. Traders spoke of it in hushed tones around campfires. Wandering herbalists used forest-brewed tinctures and claimed they came from Illyra's grove. Some said the very land was enchanted, that the wounded healed faster near Thornhold, that lost travelers were gently turned home instead of being swallowed by wilds. But the people of Thornhold knew the truth. The forest wasn't just theirs anymore. They were its, and it was calling them outward. Illyra sat beneath the elder tree one morning, her hands resting in her lap, eyes closed, listening to the roots. She felt them like threads beneath her skin, stretching further now, reaching east-south, even toward the cliffs of the sea. Something had shifted. The forest was no longer content to remain a single hidden haven. It wanted to touch the forgotten corners of the world. It wanted others to remember who they were. Kale came to her that evening, her axe sheathed, her shoulders heavy with purpose. "There are villages beyond the frost line where children are starving," she said. "People cast out for illness, magic, old blood. Some live underground just to avoid the law." Ren brought maps made from bark and ink, showing trade routes and hidden paths. "We could reach them," he said. "Not with armies, with medicine, with shelter, with memory." Even Myra, whose dreams had grown stranger and deeper, spoke softly. "I saw a place in my sleep. A city where the river runs black. A girl waits there. She sings to birds, but they do not answer. She needs a home." Illyra nodded. The decision had already been made in her heart. She had not grown Thornhold only to protect. She had grown it to restore. The next day, they gathered the people, now nearly 100 souls strong, each with their own scars, gifts, and story. Illyra stood in the circle of roots and vines and spoke clearly. "We survived because we were forgotten. But others are still forgotten, scattered, broken, alone. The forest has rooted in us, and now it wants to grow beyond us." There was silence, and then a voice, "But what if we're hunted again?" Illyra looked around at the faces, some still afraid, others hardened by survival, all deeply changed. "We do not go as conquerors," she said. "We go as gardeners." So they began. Kale led the first expedition north toward the borderlands, where outcast clans scraped out lives among frozen fields. They brought seeds that bloomed even in ice and knowledge of warm-root plants that heated huts from within. Where once the outcast mothers shivered in silence, now their children laughed. In growing groves, Ren went east into broken towns swallowed by rust and rot. He taught the people how to build homes from living trees, how to filter water with moss, how to listen for the language of stones. He never said much, but when he left, people cried. Myra went where no paths reached. She followed her dreams. Into the lost city by the Black River. She found the girl who sang to silent birds and touched her cheek gently. That girl followed her home. And everywhere they went, they left behind not laws or flags, but roots, living sanctuaries, memory, gardens, humming stones that whispered safety to the weary. Illyra remained in Thornhold, guiding, anchoring, growing. One day, a raven landed on her windowsill, its feathers tinged green. It looked at her with uncanny awareness. "You're new," she said with a smile. The raven tilted its head. Then spoke. "The world is listening." Illyra closed her eyes. She felt it then, not just the forest's will, but the awakening of something larger. A network of life, a rising. People who once believed. They were powerless now, tending land that fought back. Mothers without homes now cradling children in roots and stars. But she also felt something darker, still distant, a place where the soil refused to grow, where fire slept beneath stone, where the old powers that Corvin had barely served were gathering. Strength whispering of dominion, purity, eternal flame. And they too had heard of Thornhold. Illyra opened her eyes. She was not afraid, because the world was not just waiting to be saved. It was waiting to be remembered. And the roots of the forgotten run deep. It came first in Mira's dreams. A tree, split down the middle, half alive, half charred. Birds circling. Above it, silent. Beneath it, a river, black and bubbling, filled with reflections of faces that didn't blink. Each time, she awoke with soil on her fingertips and tears in her eyes. "Illyra," she whispered one morning, "there's a place the forest can't reach." Illyra looked at her for a long time. They both knew what that meant. Something had begun to stir beyond the reach of Thornhold and its growing circle of sanctuary villages. An ancient blight that had never healed. Not a wound, but a rot. It was called the Ashen Waste on old maps. But the forest whispered a truer name. The hollow root. No forest grew there. No animals sang. No water flowed clean. The land had once been the seat of a great power before the wars, before the purges. It had been salted, burned, and cursed. For generations it was thought dead. Now it was waking. Illyra could feel it too. Something twisted, pulsing at the edge of her awareness like a heartbeat made of stone. The raven that once brought her messages refused to fly near that place. The roots beneath the ground recoiled when she asked them to reach east. Still, Myra insisted. "I have to go," she said, "not to fight it. To understand it, I think something waits for me there." "You're too young," Kale growled, slamming her hand on the table. "She's exactly the right age," Ren said softly. "The forest chose her long before we did." Illyra said nothing at first. Then, slowly, she stood and took Myra's hands. "Then you will not go alone." They formed a small circle: Myra, Ren, and Kale, 3 branches of Thornhold's heart. Myra, the light; Ren, the mind; Kale, the blade. Illyra gave each a gift before they left. To Kale, a cloak of bark-woven armor that could mend itself. To Ren, a compass carved from an elder branch that always pointed toward life. To Myra, she gave only a kiss. "You are what the forest becomes when it remembers love," Illyra said. "Don't forget that." The journey east took them through borderlands twisted by the touch of man and fire. Forests thinned. Rivers slowed. The wind grew dry. Eventually, they crossed into a place where the earth cracked underfoot and the sky never seemed to move. The hollow root. It did not greet them. It ignored them. No birds, no trees. Just silence. Kale was on edge the entire time, axe always in hand, eyes searching for threats that didn't show themselves. Ren walked with his fingers touching the ground, trying to feel something, anything, but the compass spun in wild circles here like it had lost its sense of direction. And Mira dreamed she saw a tower buried in ash. She saw children, with no mouths and eyes made of coal. She saw a woman cloaked in flame and stone watching her from a throne made of twisted roots. "I know who you are," Mira whispered into the night. The next morning they found it, a ruin. Once a temple, maybe. Now just a husk of obsidian pillars half swallowed by ash dunes. At its center, a single tree, dead, burned black. And yet still standing, Mira walked toward it, alone, as if called. Kale tried to stop her, but Ren held her back. She has to. At the base of the tree, a voice rose not from the air, but from within Mira's chest. "You've brought the forest to the grave." She fell to her knees. "Do you know what your mother did to us?" Images flooded her. A great burning, a rebellion. A woman who looked like Alira, but wasn't standing before this very tree as fire consumed the land. Alira's ancestor. A healer turned warrior turned exile. She had tried to purify the hollow. Rutan had nearly destroyed it instead. You come from ruin. You carry its seed. Myra trembled. The ash whispered inside her, but then she felt something else, a warmth. She reached into her pouch and pulled out a single seedling Alira had given her before leaving. A sapling of Thornhold's elder tree, no larger than her thumb, wrapped in cloth. She knelt and planted it at the base of the dead tree. "I'm not here to burn you," she said. "I'm here to remember you." Silence. Then the ground cracked, but this time something green emerged, tiny, fragile, alive. The air shifted. A breeze passed. The ash settled for the first time in decades. Kale and Ren rushed to her side. "It accepted it," Mira whispered. "Not all of it. Not yet. But the hollow root isn't dead." That night, the dreams changed. Mira saw forests blooming in wastelands. She saw cities wrapped in vines instead of chains. She saw fire and root, no longer at war. And in the center of it all, Alira stood beneath a vast tree that reached the sky. Her hands outstretched to thousands gathered below. Mira awoke. The hollow root was no longer the end. It was the beginning. When Mira returned from the hollow root, she was not the same. Her steps were lighter, her eyes deeper. The forest bent toward her like sunlight toward morning. But she did not speak of what she saw right away. Not until she touched Alira's hands, and the two women sat together in silence beneath the elder tree. Then Mira whispered, "She looked like you." Alira said nothing. "She wore your face," Mira said. "But she burned everything. She broke the land." Alira's breath caught, but not in surprise. She had known. For years there had been gaps in the songs the trees sang to her. Places they would not touch. Names they would not say. One in particular, Selena. Alira had once found the name carved in an ancient cedar, deeply etched, as if the tree had tried to cut it from its own body. Selena the cleanser. Healer. Exile. Her ancestor. "Carry her blood," Alira said quietly. "I always feared I carried her mistakes too." Mira placed the seed-stained cloth from the hollow root into her hands. "Then maybe it's time to face what she left behind." Alira prepared for the journey east, not with weapons, but with memory. She spent 3 days walking through the forest, singing to the oldest trees, asking permission to leave again. They wept pollen upon her hair and left knots in her cloak that shimmered in moonlight. Kale, Mira, and Ren were ready to go with her, but Alira stopped them at the edge of the forest. "This is my step to take alone," she said. "You three brought life to a dead place. Now I must bring truth to what still hides." So she went, alone, Toward the hollow root. As she crossed into the ashlands, the forest seemed to follow her. Slowly tendrils of moss crept a little farther than before. Spores floated into gray air. But still the land remained broken. The soil growled underfoot. Birds flew wide around it. At the heart of it stood the ruin Myra had described. The dead tree. And now beside it a tiny green sapling, no taller than Alira's knee. She knelt before it, and the air turned cold. "You should not have come," a voice said. It echoed from the ruins her own voice, and yet not. Thicker, heavier, hardened by war and grief. From the shadows stepped the figure Mira had seen in dreams. So Lenn. Her face was Alira's, but her eyes held no gentleness. Her skin shimmered with burned sigils, and a long cloak of black roots trailed behind her. The forest had once tried to grow through her, but it had failed. "You ruined this land," Alira whispered. "I tried to heal it," Selena replied. "But healing can be cruel. I burned the plague. I burned the liars. I burned the rot. You burned everything. It was broken." Alira stood. "Then why is your ghost still here, choking the roots?" Selena paused. Her anger flickered just for a moment. "Because I failed, and my failure took root." Alira stepped toward the sapling. "It's time to unroot it, all of it." Selena's ghost shuddered. "You think you can fix what I destroyed with sap and song? I gave blood, I gave fire, I gave judgment, I give forgiveness," Alira said, and she knelt again. She dug her fingers into the ash, deep into the poisoned ground. She sang not a song of power, but of apology, of regret, of beginning again. The earth trembled. The dead tree above her cracked, and then something amazing happened. It wept. Thick black sap began to ooze from its bark, but it wasn't rot. It was memory. It carried images of mothers holding their children before the fires came, of healers tending wounds, of lovers dancing beneath moonlight. Before the ruin, Alira reached up and touched the sap. It didn't sting. It pulsed gently beneath her fingers. Behind her, Selena sank to her knees. "I only wanted to protect them," she whispered. "I thought if I cut away the sick, the rest could thrive." "You cut away the roots," Alira replied. "But you forgot roots grow back." The ghost of Selena bowed her head, and her body began to dissolve into light, no longer chained to this place. The cursed sigils on her arms faded. Her cloak of roots fell to ash. And then the hollow root breathed. Alira stood and turned toward the east. She felt it, the pulse of the land returning. Not fast, not easy, but real. The air warmed. The cracked soil began to shift. Flowers wouldn't bloom overnight, but something had broken open. The wound could begin to heal. And in that moment, Alira understood. She wasn't just the daughter of Selena's line. She was its redemption. When she returned to Thornhold, the trees bowed. The people gathered. She said no words at first, only placed a single bottle of dark sap on the altar of the grove. Then she turned to Myra and whispered, "Now we plant what was once unplantable." And the forest, for the first time, reached east with joy. They came in whispers at first. Wanderers, dreamers, lost souls, people who had heard of the girl raised by children of the axe, of the forest that could heal wounds that were older than bones, of a woman who spoke to trees and made even cursed lands bloom. They called it a miracle. But Thornhold never asked to be worshipped. It only asked to be remembered. Alira stood on the edge of the hollow root, where the ash had given way to seedlings, and watched as new hands helped plant the second grove. Children from the desert isles, nomads with fire-etched skin, even 2 elders from the empire that once exiled her family, each now with dirt beneath their nails and sweat on their brows. What will it be? Mira asked quietly, walking beside her. Alira looked toward the sapling they had just planted. a tree that shimmered with both green and black. Life and memory. It will be what the world becomes when it stops choosing power over belonging. Mira tilted her head. That's not a name. Alira smiled. Then let's not name it yet. Let's let it grow into something before we try to define it. That was how it began, not as a kingdom, not as a rebellion, not even as a movement Dot is attending. People began planting forest shards in forgotten corners of the world. Seeds from Thornhold were shared freely, never sold. Homes grew into hillsides, roots wrapped around ancient ruins like gentle hands. Medicine from grove keepers replaced steel in many places. Even some former enemies came to live among them, not as prisoners, but as students. Still, it wasn't all peace. There were cities that resisted the return of the wild, kingdoms that feared anything they could not label or tax. Some sent hunters, others sent scholars, hoping to bottle what made Thornhold live, but the forest could not be bottled. It could only be joined. And every time the root was threatened, it remembered the axe and those who once raised Alira in its shadow. Kale trained a new generation of guardians, not soldiers, but defenders, each chosen not for strength, but for restraint, for knowing that a tree can be a shield and silence a weapon. Ren became a mapmaker of living lands. His charts didn't show borders, but relationships between soil and song, between river and ruin. His maps breathed with the forest and Mira. Mira changed most of all. She began to dream not just of what had been, but what could be. In one vision, she saw a sky made of canopies. In another, she stood on the edge of a cliff, looking down on a city wrapped in roots, but inside it, people were laughing, living. Hold. One day, she turned to Alira and said, "It's time I left." Alira didn't try to stop her. "You were always meant to go farther than me," she said, embracing her. "Just promise me one thing." "What?" "When you find the edge of the world, plant something there." Mira smiled. "I already did." Years passed. Not in silence, but in song. The forest grew. So did the people. And as the groves multiplied, so too did the voices that called themselves Groveburn, those who lived not in defiance of the world, but in rhythm with it. The story of the woman left in the woods became a legend told beside fires, etched into bark, woven into cloaks. But Alira never sought fame, only harmony. In her final years, she returned to the very place her family had left her to die. The clearing, but it was no longer barren, no longer cruel. It had become a sanctuary. Children played in its light. Trees danced above. And in the center stood a great tree unlike any other, not the elder tree of Thornhold. This one was hers. Tall, twisting, bark like old scars, leaves that shimmered green in summer and deep gold in winter. And at its base, a small plaque written in root script. She made the forest remember. Alira sat beside it as her final breath came, not in sorrow, but in awe, because she could feel the hum beneath the ground, not just of trees and fungi, but of people, of lives once cast out, now rooted in love. She closed her eyes and became the grove. Afterward, Mira returned many seasons later. Older now, eyes filled with new stars. She knelt beneath Alira's tree and whispered, "I found the edge. I planted the seed. It bloomed in fire, but it lived." She pressed her hand to the soil, and the forest answered. All across the land, groves began to hum in harmony. From frost-bitten cliffs to sweltering marshes, from deserts to drowned cities. And above them all, a wind carried a name, Thornhold. No longer a place. Now a promise. The world remembered. And the roots never forgot.